Hello and welcome to the Manitoba School Boards Association webinar, The Science of Decision Making. I can see that some of you have tuned in now. Nice to have you on. My name is Janice Arnold, Board Development Consultant here at the association. If you're listening to this as a recording, the original air date was April 19th, 2017. Therefore, there's the added benefit of the live questions, but you can certainly contact our office later if you have anything further to ask about, or if you're looking for some of the resources. I will be posting some resources and I'm also going to start my webcam. So you'll see that I am sitting there at my desk in the office. Hi, everybody. And hopefully we don't have too much street noise to come over the microphone as well. Okay, let's click into the first bit here. The science of decision making. I rather wondered whether I was even going to call the presentation a science because it sounds very precise, and often making a decision is anything but precise and a step-by-step process. There are so many ingredients that go into the test tube that things can, sometimes go a little awry, and depending how much you shake it or leave it to sit or how fast you pour it out, you can get many different results. But I'll talk to you about some of the processes that you can go through to make it perhaps a little less painful, or I guess really just to guide you towards the best possible outcome when given the ingredients that you have. So this presentation or webinar will take, well, probably a little bit less than the half hour that it usually takes. I'm going to give you a quick overview here. School boards make decisions about all kinds of things, as you know. A policy that needs to be developed, a problem sent to you by a parent, staff, student, someone from your community, or a required response to something different on the curriculum, budget item or legislation, or even a new proposal. It just goes on and on. Whatever the case may be, your foundation statements, the board's mandate for student learning and achievement, your own division's vision and mission, or the community's values and beliefs. With a complex or difficult decision, these statements can serve you well. So use them as your starting line and refer back to them as you go through the process and are maybe debating, and then perhaps at the end when making the decision. These statements were developed, I guess, in calmer waters, and possibly when you were in the midst of even a heated, weren't in the midst of a heated debate over a decision. These are the directions that they give you some direction that you want to head, and when faced with a hard choice, going back to them, it gives you a solid base, especially when you're going back and trying to explain your actions to your community. As well, if those statements were based on community input, you have support for making the difficult choice. So if your foundations are your title or your header, then the subheadings or the ingredients for the decision process are the criteria needed to make the decision, your success measures, the data used to support that decision, options and possibly recommendations, implications, and key messages going out from the board. So let's take a closer look at those ingredients. Before the data is gathered, it's good to set some criteria for what you're going to be basing your decision on. Make sure it's clearly communicated to those gathering the data. For example, it doesn't work just to say, we want a survey. Who do you want surveyed? What's in the survey? How long is the survey? Otherwise, where you have been thinking the entire community, for example, would be surveyed, you may get back only students or parents or staff. And what about the source? Will you consider a round of phone calls, or maybe it has to be very well-based scientific evidence? This isn't to say that you're going to be deciding upon each individual data source that goes into this, but some indication of what you're looking for, how in depth, for example, that might be necessary. Giving an idea of the format for the survey report is helpful too. Even saying the report coming back from the survey should be a particular length is going to indicate how in-depth the information should be. When communicating your criteria, you might also consider what information will be given the most weight. So for example, you may be agreeing to survey a number of different sources, but then you'll say, but in the end, what's coming from the students is going to carry the most weight, or something like that. And it can be a good idea to paint a big picture for the person that's gathering the data. They might know of a good source where they can get something that you didn't even know about. So if you give them context, it can help. So for example, you can say this survey is going to contribute towards development of the budget, or something that the information will be used to set your division's 3-year strategic plan. So giving them some information and background in that can only help. So communicate from the start, and it will give them what you need from the start, instead of having to go back to the drawing board and possibly delaying a time-sensitive decision. Always sending something back to committee again and again and again might indicate that you haven't communicated well enough up front exactly what you're looking for. So if it takes even writing it down or a back and forth and saying, what do you understand by a survey? What do you understand that it is that we're actually looking for? So communicate very clearly right from the start what you need to make that decision, and it'll serve you well and hopefully won't delay those decisions. At the very least, it will also contribute to you being more transparent as a board, or efficient and effective if that information or survey information is going out to your community. So think about setting up those criteria in advance and communicating it very well, and you should hopefully get what you're looking for in the first place. Once the decision has been made and implemented, how do you know that it was the right decision and the action taken was a success? Knowing in advance what is to be accomplished and possibly how it will contribute toward your foundation statements or accomplishing them. So for example, remember when I said your mandate is student learning and achievement. How is that decision going to actually accomplish student learning and achievement? That may help steer the decision as well, the measures that you're going to use. Doing a debrief after the fact can at times not be as objective, saying, we've made this decision, and let's say now, was that decision successful? Outcomes can sometimes be massaged by those with a vested interest to see the success of a decision or an action. If someone wanted a decision to go in a particular direction, it's easy to say after the fact, yes, it met our measures for success, but setting those measures before you even set out and implementing that decision is probably the more prudent way to go. If care is taken to lay those success measures in advance so they fit with the foundation statements or specific directives, then judgment of their success is more unbiased, really. And measures are exactly that. Hopefully you can set something up that can actually be measured. So quantitative and qualitative measures both have their place. Setting them up in advance, however, gives you confidence in the outcome. And if you find that the outcome is not as expected, then the debrief helps define a change in your next course of action. A crucial ingredient for a decision is the information or data. Of course, as I noted earlier, you may also depend on other things such as past experience, emotions, or relationships. But hopefully one of the most important pieces in making that decision is sound data, and it's used to make unbiased and well-supported decisions, or decisions that are defensible. Within the governing of our school boards, we often refer to this as data-informed or data-driven decisions, a concept strongly advocated for in the Lighthouse study or in the Leadership for Student Learning model. If you are looking for more information on this, that's another recorded webinar. We talk a little bit and give some background there, and also let you know where you can find out more information from the people that actually put together the Lighthouse study and the Leadership for Student Learning. So need that as another webinar, another bit of information presentation. Okay, you are basing a decision on data, but is it sound data? And by that I mean, is it defensible? Is it based on hearsay? Was it a Facebook posting as opposed to a peer-reviewed academic article? Is it anecdotal information or a legitimate survey that covers maybe the whole community? Maybe it was anecdotal information coming forward from PAC, the Parent Advisory Council. Is the resource recognized and respected? What are the credentials of the person providing that data, and are they a good resource? Is it someone who's is respected and considered an expert in their field? Precedent set by a relationship that has previously shown integrity, and it's not just subjective information. Perhaps you need to consider whether the source has an ulterior motive. Is the report unbiased? So somebody giving you information, but you know in advance that what kind of outcome they're hoping for with that decision. I've heard a definition of sound data, and it goes something like, sound data can be described as organized investigations and observations conducted by qualified personnel using documented methods and leading to verifiable results and conclusions. So you might think of it as facts or conclusions supported by methods using high standards. Hope that makes sense. So I will say, though, that there is a place for emotion and relationships and experience, but having sound data that also backs up those emotions or experience makes them that much more defensible. So think of it this way: if you're on a committee and you've been asked to look into something and come back presenting options with a recommendation to your board, then it's much easier to support that recommendation and have them go through with it if you also have the strong evidence to support it. So rather than just coming back to the board with a verbal report on a summary and this is what we found, having strong data to support what you're actually trying to convince them of can only serve you well. But then if you look at it from the other side, it's also the board's job to discern what is acceptable data. So again, going back to a point I made earlier, setting up the criteria that you're looking for from a committee, for example, or a delegation, saying this is what would be acceptable criteria that would enable us to make that decision. You should be, as a board, looking for that when the report comes back to you. So it's feeling good about the science of the data, if you like. The next three areas all pertain to how a report is actually presented to your board. It can come, as I said, from your administration, a committee of the board, a delegation, and such. I'll say first that I'm very much an advocate for ensuring that whoever is putting forward a report, the board insists that it's presented in a clear manner that makes it easy to decipher exactly what is being asked. So the choices, they should be well defined and in easily understood language. It can include implications of those choices, and it's helpful if everyone is singing from the same song sheet. So at the end, looking at the key messages on why a particular decision was made, it can go a long way to smooth implementation of a decision. A report that has reams of information with nothing to pull it together is not really useful. So one thing that most boards, or a lot of boards, use is some type of summary for a complex or lengthy decision. Data that is, you're looking at an inch-thick report. So that type of summary, it's been called a major issue template, an executive summary, or a management analysis. It's most often something like 1 page in length, 1.5 pages, but it summarizes a large body of material so that it really brings the crux of the decision together, and you can be reminded of that as you go through the debate. I have put a template for this type of summary at the end, which you can download and use, and you can even, if you want to use parts of it or whatever, and it gives a quick explanation of those. So just a quick aside, I'm thinking, is there a question there? Anyway, letting you know there's that window at the bottom left there if you do have a question that comes up, and I will look at those at the end. Okay, click on to the next part. The report's components include a 1 to 2 sentence statement of the issue. So I'm just going to go through what that should actually look like. This statement could actually be used for a future motion. So thinking that a very clearly worded 1 to 2 sentences that talks about the actual issue makes it easy to make a motion later. Of course, that can be changed as it actually goes to motion. Then there's the background. What has brought you to this place? Why are you even making this decision? Possibly why the board needs to consider the issue or a consequence of the issue, what's going to happen if it isn't dealt with. It might include some history or subsequent developments that has led the board to make this decision or to this issue. Then a short paragraph can lay out the current situation. Included there should be the options available to the board with their implications, and here support for the foundation statements or the directives can also be given. It can include or state subsequent actions required by the board or administration, but that can really serve as giving authorization for the people implementing the decision. So something written there that they can go back to and say, this is why we did it or what we based it on. And within those options, some things you can also consider including are a cost benefit, if we do, if we don't, significance for students, staff, or parents, impact on our administration or operations, and possibly whether the decision must recognize policy or perhaps legislation. The report summary, it might also include if the board requested, and you can say if they do request a recommendation, so you can put that in there. The board should consider whether the information is impartial, transparent, or accountable. And the decision is ultimately the board's, we must remember that. So if they do make it, they know that they're ultimately responsible for it and they will also own it. So having a good report and something to back it up with is can be useful, and it's well documented there. Finally, the summary might include a couple of bullets on key messages, as I talked about before. A report doesn't have to include this every time because it may be more suited to developing messages after the decision is made or when the whole board is sitting there together. Or bringing them all on side and making sure everyone is comfortable with it. But those key messages are useful because the board needs to speak with one voice. Also, taking the time to figure out priorities or key elements of a decision, it goes a long way to acceptance and maintaining control of an issue that is maybe divisive within your community. It's also helpful in implementing the action that goes along with that after. So this is why we are taking this action. I've also put at the end there author, and you might include date as well. If it's a delegation, an external organization, or your administration team who actually penned the summary or report, you may want to ask them to include this because it's helpful just when it comes to any follow-up. And a quick note here on the data itself. As a trustee, I'm sure you've had the experience around the table where different people need different information or different amounts of information in order to feel comfortable making a decision. So there's still a place to make available the data for everyone if they feel that they need it. But making sure that that data is also presented in an easily readable manner, and so that people can easily pose questions about it, read it, understand it. If you've got too much information there, if it's not in language that you can easily deal with, if it's got a lot of technical issues and language around it, it just makes it that much more difficult. So people need to have information that they can understand and can use. So planning to make a good decision as a board heads out right from the beginning and going back to the points I made at the beginning, putting down those criteria and making people feel comfortable that we are going to make a decision in the short term and we're going to make it based on this can prevent you that situation where it keeps getting sent back to a committee, or where you just keep going around and around and around with the same arguments. So plan to make that good decision. And so now I'll go through just a couple of the key points from the beginning. Starting with your foundation statements and using them in times of difficulty or making difficult decisions, referring to them as your primary or priority intentions in the first place. Communicating what you need in advance. And if you leave someone guessing at the beginning on what type of survey or just a vague request, you're going to be getting back that type of information, and you're going to be guessing a decision later, and perhaps a decision that doesn't include all the information that you would like to have had. And one last point, it's the board that has to make the decision and own it, as I said. So plan to make some of those points that we outlined earlier, and don't back off when it comes to getting you all the information you need to make a good decision. Okay, I'm going to flip over to this last one here. If you'll see there in the resources in the top part there is lined, I've got an executive summary that you can download. You can take it from there. What I've got in that executive summary too, it gives just some choices, and I'm not saying that you have to use this all the time. If you have just a 3-page report, it's not necessary. If you do have, you can set your own board's cutoff line there. You can say if it's beyond 6 pages, 10 pages, or whatever, you need to have an executive summary, and you can use some of the pieces in there. You can ask for a recommendation or not ask for a recommendation, just whatever suits you, but something that has a bit of a process to it can make the decision all that much easier. So I do have one question there, and as I'm answering this, feel free to add any more there. It's got here, you mentioned data-informed decisions, oh yes, and the Lighthouse study. Where can we find out more information, get materials on the Lighthouse study? If you just go and put in, a search engine on the internet and type in Lighthouse study and Iowa, it actually comes from the Iowa Association of School Boards. They did the study. So if you go to their website, it should tell you a little bit more about it there. And there's also good publications. There's a book on it and a study guide that I believe you can purchase from that website. It doesn't actually cost a lot. And I did mention earlier that there is a different recorded webinar that goes through in very short form all of the various points from the Lighthouse study, or learning for I forget what it calls, learning and accomplishing the most you can, or something like that. Learning for success, maybe that's what it's called. So that's it. As I said, it's a quick webinar this time. We're just up to 25 minutes, but if you do have further questions, I think that's the last one coming in now. Feel free to contact me at the association, and if you're looking for this executive summary another time, it should be posted as a resource under our webinar library. You can also download it from there. This recording will be put up in probably by the end of today, and you can feel free to share it with any of the rest of your board, or you can refer back to it for some of the step-by-step points that I talked about. Also, if you have any other ideas for a webinar that you'd like us to look into, whether it's myself or an external person, then feel free to drop me a line on that as well. So thanks for joining us. Oh, I've got one other thing in here, and it's just a comment on this, that some good points there, and thanks a lot. Hope you can refer to it another time. Take care and have a good week.